mpaka Ijumaa, moja kwa moja kutoka VOA Swahili, Washington.
Hello, I'm Esther Githo-Yuwat. It's Wednesday, October 19th. This is Africa 54.
UNICEF says Somalia's hunger is sending one child every minute to a health facility for urgent malnutrition care. VOA's Paul Ndiho has details. Now more than 600 Nigerians have died from flooding that has driven more than 1 million people from their homes. Adding to their misery is a flood-created impasse on food and fuel shipments, rocketing prices. Timothy Obeizu describes the scene in central Kogi State. Ghanian Ohemaa Andoh sees STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics as the way upward for young women. The founder of Girls in Science and Technology in Kumasi describes her mission to VOA tech correspondent Paul Ndiho.
The United Nations Children's Agency says one child is admitted to a health facility in Somalia every minute to be treated for severe acute malnutrition. Paul Ndiho has more.
The United Nations warned at the beginning of September that 2 Somali districts were projected to face famine between October and December, with more than 500,000 children in Somalia at risk of dying from malnutrition. The country is at risk of child death on a scale not seen in decades.
The latest admission rates from August in Somalia show 44,000 children admitted with severe acute malnutrition. Now, if we break down those numbers for the month, that is that today, every single minute of every single day, a child is being admitted to a health facility for the treatment of severe acute malnutrition. So it's 1 per minute. That's a child whose mother has walked for days to get her help, a child who's fighting to survive, a child whose life, of course, hangs in the balance.
Elder says the situation looks worse than in 2011, when famine killed more than 250,000 people in Somalia.
As we've said many times before, severely acutely malnourished children are 11 times more likely to die of diarrhea and measles and so on than well-nourished children. So with rates like those I've mentioned, Somalia really is on the brink of a tragedy at a scale not seen in decades.
The Horn of Africa is suffering its worst drought in 40 years after the last 4 rainy seasons failed.
The situation looks like the famine of 2011. It is worse than the 2017 drought situation. I was working in 2011, and now the situation is similar.
The situation in Somalia is made worse by attacks from Al-Shabaab terrorists and high global food prices. In addition, farmers in central Somalia have joined the fight against Al-Shabaab. Al-Shabaab, which opposes the federal government and the presence of peacekeepers and other foreigners on Somali soil, has seized territory in the country in recent years, taking advantage of the rifts within the Somali security services and disagreements between federal authorities and regional leaders. Somali President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud recently declared total war against Al-Shabaab following a deadly attack on a hotel in Mogadishu in August. Part of this response has been to recruit farmers to fight in areas where Al-Shabaab has been operating. The Somali National Army and heavy artillery from the African Union Mission in Somalia are supporting farmers that are fighting. Paul Ndiho, VOA News, Washington.
Earlier, I spoke to Abdi Samatar, a former Somali senator and a professor at the University of Minnesota, and asked him to paint the picture for us on hunger in Somalia, where children and mothers are fighting for survival. Professor, so how are hospitals coping with these overwhelming numbers of severely malnourished children and mothers?
They are absolutely and utterly unprepared. There are very few hospitals in the country more broadly. I mean, if you look at the number of physicians to the population, you are talking about one physician per 100,000, if not more. So there are barely any hospitals one can speak of. But many of the people who are coming from the countryside, who are walking 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 miles to come to a place of refuge in Mogadishu, the hospitals are absolutely inundated. They don't have the resources, they don't have the facilities, nor do they have the kind of staff they need that can immediately inject life into these people immediately. So it's a desperate and a desolate circumstances.
What do you expect to see happen from the international community to help save the lives of mothers and children who are dying every day?
I understand the reticence of the world, sort of FAO, to use the name famine, much like they were reticent to use the name genocide in Rwanda in 1994. And then later on, they realized they were sort of well behind the truck, so to speak. So I would like to see FAO declare famine immediately, and for all the international community to focus on the hundreds of thousands of people who are literally on the verge of decimation. That's what I would like to see. And you cannot, and I underscore again, you cannot ignore the crisis and call it maybe it's famine, maybe it's not famine. I have seen walking ill skeletons who have come from the countryside, children whose arms are almost as thin as my finger, if you like. It's high time they declare it.
What are you hearing from the president of Somalia, the leadership in Somalia, when it comes to saving these children and these women from what is happening on the ground?
I mean, there is some platitudes that he has appointed an envoy on sort of what he calls drought and the famine. And that gentleman has been going around the world trying to drum support, legitimately doing good work, but it's too little too late. I think what the Somali government should have done, the president should have done day one when he was elected, and I was one of those people who were in parliament who were sort of taking part of that process. That's the day he should have declared famine and immediately put whatever little resources the country has, postpone the fight for Al-Shabaab to the next day once we have saved these people. If you remember in 2011, there was this sort of embargo on the country because of Al-Shabaab. And in the process, 250,000 Somali lives were lost to that famine. We don't want to repeat that. And the president and the parliament need to act immediately.
What should Africa do when the next door families are suffering? Because then when you talk about the European Union and how they say these people look like us, what about Africa? How does Africa come together to help one another when there's a crisis of this magnitude?
I appreciate this is a very relevant and central question. I'm conscientiously mindful of that. The African Union has been by and large a flop. There are individual African leaders who are sort of taking the responsibility that's on their shoulders. But what I would have liked to suggest is that there is a contingent of African Union force, military force in Somalia, 20,000 or 21,000 of them. Some of those troops should be deployed to act and help those people who are dying of famine. That's what the African Union in Addis Ababa should have done. That's what President Ruto of Kenya should do. That's what the Ethiopian Prime Minister should do. That's what Cyril Ramaphosa should do. If they mean African solutions for African problems, they certainly are sleeping on the switch.
That was Abdi Samata, a professor at the University of Minnesota. The Ethiopian army says it has captured 3 towns in the northern region of Tigray, Shire to the northwest, and Korem and Alamata to the south of the regional capital, Mekelle. Tigray authorities have acknowledged losing control of Shire, located about 140 kilometers northwest of Mekelle. Shire hosts tens of thousands of people who were displaced from other areas by the conflict. It also has an airport and is one of the region's biggest towns. Meanwhile, Human Rights Watch is calling for targeted sanctions and an arms embargo against Ethiopia to help protect civilians as the war in Tigray intensifies. The death toll from heavy flooding in Nigeria has now surpassed 600, with more than 1 million people displaced from their homes. The flooding has covered farms and roads and slowed shipments of food and fuel. A jump in prices is already making life more expensive for Nigerians. Timothy Obeizu reports from Central Kogi State.
Tons of food and fuel sit far away from their destinations as the impact of Nigeria's worst flooding in 10 years unfolds. This is Dantata Bridge, a link line that allows the crisscross of essentials between northern and southern Nigeria, including the capital. Weeks of severe flooding in Kogi State have washed away farmlands and affected access roads. And desperation is being felt in Abuja, many kilometers away.
We are struggling to get the fuel, as you can see from the queue. There's no fuel. It's only one filling station in the whole area that sells fuel.
33 of Nigeria's 36 states are affected. Authorities say more than 2 million people are affected. The flooding is blamed on unusual amounts of rainfall, which began in early summer, and the release of water from Cameroon's Lagdo Dam. In some instances, floodwaters reach as high as the rooftops, leaving communities completely submerged. Halima Sani arrived at this makeshift camp about 1 month ago with her 8 children. She says food is a major problem.
Before the flood came, my husband and I were farmers. We used to feed on our farm produce. We were about to harvest when the flood came and destroyed everything. We were not able to harvest a single crop and our house is underwater. That's why we came here for shelter. I struggle to find something to eat with my children.
Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari this week directed emergency responders to scale up their interventions and said up to 12 metric tons of grains are being shipped to help curb the impact of the floods. But camp officials are not certain when the aid will arrive and say they may run out of places to put people as the camp continues to fill.
We are still calling on the federal government.
We are still calling on the federal government to come in where these people live. If they can relocate them to somewhere else where they can get new accommodations, it will be easy for them, because this is a yearly occurrence.
Experts predict food prices will jump by up to 25% towards the end of the year as a result of the flooding. Nigerian authorities are planning to hold talks with Cameroon next month about the periodic opening of the Lagdo Dam. Authorities also say they will be focusing on climate change mitigation during the International COP27 conference slated for next month in Egypt. But while authorities seek long-lasting solutions, hundreds of thousands displaced here look for life's basic needs: food, shelter, and clean water. Timothy Obeizu for VOA News, Kogi State, Nigeria.
The International Monetary Fund says global economic turmoil is a huge setback for African countries, many of whom were on a strong path to recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. The IMF has issued a warning to countries worldwide that the worst is still to come. The fund has released a new report detailing sub-Saharan Africa's economic outlook. Host of VOA Straight Talk Africa, Heidi Adams, spoke with the head of the IMF's Africa Department, Abebe Aimro Selassie, to discuss some of the findings.
The International Monetary Fund has released its Sub-Saharan Economic Outlook report. It's called Living on the Edge. What do you mean by living on the edge? On the edge of what?
It's a very good question. So, overall, I think a fairly difficult time for the region. Thankfully, countries were not hit as bad by the health effects of the pandemic, but of course the economic toll on the region was really awful. And last year, finally, the region was beginning to put, the full effects of the pandemic behind it and beginning to grow, and we saw growth accelerating to 4.1%. But this year that has, reversed, and so we are projecting growth to decelerate, to slow to 3.6%. So really difficult, and in a region which needs to grow by 7-8%, honestly, to make a difference in poverty reduction, address, the improvements in living standards that are needed. This decline is really awful, and really points to a very difficult year. And we've characterized it as living on the edge because really households, families really are exhausting their buffers. And in fact, we are actually seeing food insecurity increasing in some parts of the region. And when you look at the situation of many governments' finances, many, not all, I should stress, you're seeing a lot of strains. Governments, not having enough resources to be able to, continue spending on health, education, exactly because they are facing a lot of short-term pressures from needing to provide more food imports, needing to, facing very high food import bills. So we wanted to paint a picture where countries are exhausting all their buffers, all their resources, and reaching, the end of their tethers, as it were.
What are the signs that a country is in debt distress?
This is an assessment done on a country-specific basis, and taking into account what the growth outlook is, prospects for the economy, prospects for income. So we do something called a debt sustainability analysis in each country case when a country asks for support. It's on the basis of that we have a discussion about where the debt pressures are. So one indicator, for example, is the share of tax revenues that goes towards servicing debt. Is it reasonable or not? Because the higher the share of revenue that the government uses to pay debt, it crowds out spending on health, on education, or infrastructure.
What are those tax measures? What are you should countries be looking at taxing? Luxury goods, exports?
Taxation is a much, spending too, is a deeply domestic and deeply political issue. So what we identify really is, when we work with countries, how much potential tax collection, scope for tax collection is, and are they approaching that potential? What might be the factors that are not there? But in terms of what the balance of tax handles they want to use, of course, I think is a deeply domestic thing.
The IMF's Abebe Amro Selassie speaking to VOA's Heidi Adams. Be sure to catch the rest of that interview on this week's episode of Straight Talk Africa. Still to come, we continue our Africa Digital Innovation Competition profiles with a look at Kenya's David Jonjo and his startup Grow Agric. We'll be right back.
The search is on for Africa's best and brightest minds in finance, cybersecurity, technology, and anything digital, making social impact through cutting-edge technologies, innovation, and creativity in Africa. Out of 17,000 candidates from 50 countries in North, Central, East, West, and Southern Africa, only 3 will be selected from the top 10 continental finalists from Egypt, Nigeria, Ghana, Zimbabwe, Kenya, and Cameroon. Join the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and its prestigious partners, including the Voice of America, when the 3 finalists are featured at the U.S. Africa Leaders Summit in December 2022 in Washington. Stay tuned.
In other African news, Cameroon's Public Health Ministry says there are hundreds of new cholera cases along the country's northern border with Nigeria, and at least 17 people have died of the bacterial disease. The International Monetary Fund's approval of up to $54 million in emergency funding for Malawi appears imminent. And UNICEF says more than 2.8 million children in South Sudan are out of school across the country as a result of flooding. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce's U.S. Africa Business Center is convening its first annual Africa Digital Innovation Competition for African startups. VOA is working as a media partner with the Africa Business Center on this initiative. Out of 17,000 candidates in 50 countries in Africa, the top 10 finalists have been chosen, and for the next 2 weeks, we'll bring you a look at each one. Today, we look at David Jonjo from Kenya, whose startup Grow Agric provides logistical, financial, and marketing support to farmers to help them increase their food production.
My name is David Jonjo. I'm 38 years old. I'm the COO and co-founder at Grow Agric, and I am a proud Kenyan. We applied primarily because we met the criteria once we saw the announcement coming out, and we saw this as an opportunity for us to spread our gospel, to other markets and to other people, to get, recognition from others outside there in the market and people in other countries is a big achievement for ourselves. So it's something that we are proud of. Basically, Grow Agric is an end-to-end solution, providing farmers with logistical, financial, and market support. So we work with farmers from inception when they're starting. We train farmers. We provide them with financing for all the inputs that they require. We help monitor their farming process. We've created digital record-keeping tools where farmers are able to manage their farms and track how well they're performing. At the end of the farming cycle, then we help them also sell their produce for competitive prices. There's a huge gap across Africa in terms of food production, and we haven't been able to feed our population. So by helping these farmers increase their production, then we're also helping to fill that gap and ensure there's enough food to go around for the population. We also have programs where we're also enabling the youth, so where we work with experienced farmers and we match them with a newbie, so to speak, farmers who are setting up. And through learning from them and having that knowledge transfer, then we're able to sort of improve and create employment opportunities. So the first thing we will do when we win the competition will be to celebrate with our farmers, with the people within the team that we've been really working hard to get up to this point, and then use the resources that are going to be deployed to us to expand our offering, to improve on our processes, and get to a point where we're able to move the needle towards obtaining our vision of having over 500,000 farmers by the end of 2025.
Thursday on Africa 54 will profile Cameroon's Raoul Fossi and his startup, Skyview Solution. It's time for our technology report, and joining us now is our tech reporter, Paul Ndiho. Hello, Paul.
Hello, Esther. Proficient computer programming skills are a way to earn a decent income. But for Ohemaa Andoh, it's about encouraging and inspiring young girls to pursue careers in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Her goal is to build an army of young tech-savvy entrepreneurs in Ghana. I spoke to Ohemaa Andoh, founder of Girls in Science and Technology and the director at Kumasi-based PMI STEAM Education Center. Welcome to Africa 54.
Hello, Paul. Thank you for having me.
Right off the bat, let's start off by you telling us a little bit about what you do. You run an organization that empowers young people, that trains, that gives young people a new lease on life. You give them skills that are critical in this day and age. Let's start there.
I run two organizations, actually, and the first one is PM STEAM Educational Center. And with that, our focus is more from 5 years to 14 years, where we take kids through coding, robotics, and we're also teaching kids piano and the guitar. So that is what we focus on, basically to develop their skills, right? Their communication skills, critical thinking skills, to make them exceptional beings and well-rounded adults when they grow up. Yes, so that is what I focus on. And with the second organization, that is Girls in Science and Technology, it's called GIST, and that is an NGO that focuses on advocating for our young girls to pursue careers in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So we do that by providing them with mentorship. We talk to companies to provide them with internship opportunities. We do trainings with these young ladies as well. So those are the two things, but they are all centered around STEM and STEAM.
What motivated you to start these programs? These are all very interesting programs trying to tap into the young people, maybe build their skills, their talents. What got you into this space?
With GIST, I started off my career as a cementing and stimulations engineer. So most of my job was offshore. And there were times where I always say to people, go like, wow, there were times where you would find yourself being the only lady amongst 200 men. So you would have to do everything with these men, share rooms with the men, share the bathroom, do basically everything with them. So it got me thinking, is it that women don't know about this, or women are scared to go into this? So during that time, I was researching and I found out it cuts across a lot of the STEM fields, like the STEM fields, basically to find very few women there. And also during my time offshore, when I share posts on Instagram and social media, like I would have people ask me, what did you study to do this? So some weren't even aware of options like that for them. As much as some were scared, some also were not aware of options like that. And most of the time when we turn on our TVs, when you listen to the news and we have a representative talking about engineering, what you see is a guy. You see a male figure doing that. And one thing I really believe in is visibility. Like when you see something someone is doing, you can just hope and dream to be that. So you start working towards that. So that is why I started GIST.
You brought up a very important point. Globally, when it comes to STEM, there are fewer women. When you go to these tech companies, you see fewer women. But that is changing, and thanks to the likes of you who are making that change happen. When you look back, what were some of the challenges you trying to fit in? Or what should other young women who are afraid to go on that journey be looking at?
During that time, I didn't see it as a challenge, because once you are able to go through it, it takes you to a higher step, right? So I just felt it was something that I needed to, it wasn't really a challenge for me. It was like a growth that I needed to go through. When I bring it to me promoting STEM amongst women, amongst kids, the challenge is lack of understanding, because when you're dealing with kids, you'd have to go through their parents. So the parents also have to understand the whole STEM concept out there. They are not used to it. It's new to most of these parents. And trying to let them see how that skill, the child needs that skill, how it's going to help them develop. I think that has actually been my greatest challenge, getting parents to come on board, getting parents to understand how important this is now. You'd find some parents tell you these things are for white people, they are not for black people. They normally say that. When I go like, no, these are skills that we all need. We need to have a certain mindset. And for me, STEM and STEAM is not just career oriented. For me, I feel everybody needs to work with that mindset. When I say a STEM or STEAM mindset, basically you identify problems, you come up with solutions to these problems, you work with people, you communicate in teams. So just the problem-solving mindset that we need as a people.
Ohemaa, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me, Paul.
Ohemaa Andoh is the founder of Girls in Science and Technology and the director at PM STEAM Education Center in Kumasi, Ghana. That's it. Back to you, Esther.
Thank you, Paul. Be sure to join Paul every Wednesday for another tech report right here on Africa 54. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.